Let us begin. 1, 2, 3. All right, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to Dudes Talking, the Astroturfed Counterculture Movement with Carl Hassell. Carl, are you there? It's good to have you here, man. You know, you've probably seen Carl in the various chat boxes in YouTube, and you've probably seen him with his previous 2 streams with some of the stuff that we're going to discuss today on Crypto Beast's channel, Steve Outram. And I've, seen Carl in my chat for a long time and saw that he brought great information and thoughtful insight. And him and I have been, talking together, for, I gotta say, about a month or so, maybe 2 months now, and sharing information. And, I wanted to bring his body of research to you guys because I think it's very crucial. And, Carl has not only, done the research, he's lived it too, which, a few of us have done too as well. So, Carl, I guess just to start with, tell everybody in the audience a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind. Real quick. Yeah. Yes. So when was the Peyote Way Church of God founded? And what can you tell us about Emmanuel Trejo? Okay.
Called Project Open Hand and the Church of the Holy Light. But in 1977, the 3 of them got together and incorporated the Peyote Way Church. Now, Emmanuel is a very interesting character. There's almost nothing known about him. The oldest known documents are FBI files from 1952 and 53, and his 1955 book, which is extremely rare and hard to find. And if anybody can get a copy, I strongly suggest you do that, because they are buying up copies of it because they don't want it out there. It completely contradicts the official Peyote Way history. In the 1950s, Emmanuel went under the name of Man of True Hill and infiltrated a couple of rightist groups. He was a paid agent of the ADL, and he worked with guys, super spies like Stepanowski and Sanford Griffith, and they paid him to infiltrate the National Renaissance Party, which was run by James Mattall. And he essentially took it over. By 1953, he had taken it over. And he was fomenting anti-Semitic literature and riots and sending boxloads of literature to all over Europe, soliciting funds for the ADL to fight anti-Semitism that he was fomenting.
Wow.
He basically was exposed. They found out who he was. He had been a student at the Communist Front Jefferson School in New York City after he got out of the Army. And he himself claims that he was a communist basically from 1948. So the Jefferson School was one of several fronts that were communist run. One of them, that was in New York City. Once the lid was blown, the ADL kind of wiped their hands of him. And then he got involved with a high-class prostitute named Pat Ward, who was essential in bringing down the Oleo heir, Mickey Jelke. And Emmanuel had to testify, and he was working with the FBI then and had his apartment taped. He was taping all the conversations, and he used in the second trial of Mickey Jelke. Later on, in 1955, he kind of disappeared, then turns up in Canada and was arrested on a cannabis smuggling charge and spent 2 years in a Canadian jail. The Canadian authorities said he was going under 10 different aliases. He had a whole scheme going where he elicited the help of another smuggler and a woman who he thought was on the level, and she turned out to be a Royal Canadian Mounted Police undercover. So when they crossed into the U.S., they busted him, and he did 2 years in Canada. You don't hear anything else about him until 1960, when all of a sudden he's an Indian artist, craftsman. And he basically traveled around in his van and started the Manna Pottery Company.
Interesting.
Officially, it says 1948. He supposedly started the company. But when you read their history, he was in the hospital, completely blown apart in a bomb blast at the island of Heligoland. And he supposedly was rebuilt, rib cage, face blown out, plate in his head. So he supposedly discovered pottery in the rehabilitation room. That was 1948. But in his book in 1955, it says he was mustered out on a 30% disability from a parachute jump. Doesn't mention anything that he was an artist. It doesn't mention he was blown apart. Didn't mention that he started a company in 1948. And as a matter of fact, he has claimed to be half Apache, 1/4 Apache, and full Apache. This is easy enough to find through research. And
it's more Native American than Elizabeth Warren. But, you know, it's interesting, I guess, one thing about Emmanuel Requick is he kind of reinvented his history very similar to how the Church of Scientology did with L. Ron Hubbard. It seems like, you know, you have the information out there, the true information out there about L. Ron Hubbard, but then you have kind of like the mythology of the Church of Scientology, the myth of L. Ron Hubbard. So it seems, you know, you have the truth about Emmanuel Trujillo and who he truly is, and then you have the mythology of the man that he kind of built up of himself, or maybe even the United States, you know, intelligence agencies built up around him, you know, kind of to represent, you know, his status in the Peyote Way Church of God.
Yeah. In 1960, he claimed to have been born on the San Carlos Apache Reservation. But in his book, in the section about the author, it says he was born in Pennsylvania to a Catholic mother and an Apache father. Well, if you look through the more modern information, all of a sudden he's half Jewish now. And they've been pushing that angle. You cannot be half Jewish if your mom is a Catholic.
Well, yeah, I mean, his father being an Apache, I seriously doubt he was Apache and Jewish. So you have an Apache father and you have a Catholic mother. So there's something not right here with this genealogy here.
Yeah. Yeah. I lost my train of thought. Let me see. Oh, my.
So
go for it.
With Emmanuel, he's kind of keeps reinventing himself to whatever necessary person that he has to be. But you see that with people who commonly either work for intelligence agencies or people who tend to grift off of people, for lack of a better words, like they constantly have to reinvent themselves so that the truth of whom they are doesn't completely get out. So you have connections of, Emmanuel, who now claims to be half Jewish. He worked, directly in the behest of the Anti-Defamation League to, drum up a reason for the Anti-Defamation League to exist and to be as large as it is today, right? So you have that aspect of it. But you had mentioned in your interview with Steve Outram that there were Peyote Way Church of God connections to the Mormon Church and to Mormonism, which I found, very fascinating, and of course something that you would suspect, right? Because the Mormons, work a lot in intelligence agencies within the United States. Like there are many Mormons that are high up in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, for example. So, what were the connections with the Mormon Church with the Peyote Way Church of God?
Well, they claim they have no connection. The only thing that they adhere to is the Section 89 Word of Wisdom from the Book of Mormon, the dietary guidelines. However, with a simple amount of looking around, they are actually listed as an official Mormon sect, and they're part of something called the United Order, which was started by Joseph Smith. And Emmanuel was a fourth-degree clergy in the United Order, and you tithe over everything, all your property, et cetera, et cetera. but members don't know this, and they always stress, we're not part of the Mormons. We just adhere to their dietary guidelines. Well, that's just simply not true. You know, I sent you the link with the Mormon splinter groups right from the official church, and he's right there. And, you know, it's that kind of deceit. You know, what happened was peyote was very popular with beatniks in the late 50s and early 60s. And I believe he found a way, a little racket, to continue selling drugs and get some get a thing going. They have it's weaponized anthropology, and it's weaponized. Well, it's weaponized anthropology. He has created a religion of all race peyote use, and he was a Native American church roadman, and they claimed that he never applied for an all-race charter, and if he did, they would have rejected it, where in their official literature it says that he had an all-race charter, and then they revoked it when the LSD craze hit, and, you know, there was all that problems with the LSD use. And it isn't true. So he had his own thing going, created this whole scene, you know, and he's supposed to be this war hero, half Jewish, half Apache, and he created a all-race church. Well, I was taking peyote as far back as 1975 with my Indian friends from the Havasupai Reservation, and I never had to pay for peyote at all, and there was no donation, as they call it, the Peyote Way calls it. And it's all about life. It's about restoration. You know, peyote has worked wonders and cured people of alcoholism, where Peyote Way is basically obsessed with death, and they tell you in their literature, death is a door that opens, and peyote will help you when you die. Well, that's not what peyote is. It's just another death cult and a grift. It's a fake religion. It has been frowned upon and condemned by the Native American Church. And, you know, I have so much grammar on this. I wanted to stick to the perimeters of our questions because you can really dig deep and get lost with this guy. And we don't have enough time for that. So what I did was I gave you enough information so you could say, okay, there it is, you know.
Yeah. So with the Peyote Way Church of God, how do they make their money? How do they stay in business?
They have a cottage industry selling pottery called Mana Pottery. You know, you can find it on their website. They have, you go to Peyote Way's website, and they'll give you the history of the church and the Mana Pottery Company. There's another link. It's a cottage industry. They make the pottery there and ship it around the world. That's where they get their money. They also have what's called a donation for a spirit walk, a peyote experience. When I first joined the church, it used to be $50. Then it went up. When I did the show with Steve Otram, it was up to $300. And now if you go on their website, they're charging $800 and up. They have little boxes where you can actually fill in and donate more than the $800 for a single peyote experience. I don't know where the money is going.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and if you've ever been out there or watched any of the YouTube videos, they have very different ones there on YouTube. It looks like a broken down hippie commune. It's just, you know, it's a completely broken down hippie commune. So where the hell is all this money going? And they have a 3-month waiting list for people to take a spirit walk.
So people are paying $800, but they're paying $800 to stay not in the lap of luxury or even modest, you know, accommodations.
Yes, you get a campsite.
So you're exactly right. Where's all the money going to if they're booked up so much? Like, what is happening with it? It's not obviously going back into the business, right? You know?
Trading in the stock market. I don't know.
I mean, so let me ask you this. Do you think that the Peyote Way Church of God is just another way for the United States intelligence agencies to promote the illicit use of drugs, to kind of destabilize culture? Do you think it's just another way? You know, is it very trendy in Hollywood for people?
Yes, I do.
Is it very trendy in Hollywood for people to go, you know, to try to join the church or, you know, try to use peyote or anything?
In answer to your first question, yes. I think it is a conduit for the drug use and destabilization of society. Secondly, you know, there's guys like Peter Coyote, the actor, who's very active with them, but he's not on the official roles. He's an associate member, as well as Bill Walton, the basketball star.
So
And
yeah,
Whoopi Goldberg is a celebrity collector of their pottery, as is
wow,
Bill, as is at one time Richard Nixon and Barry Goldwater.
wow, okay, okay. So it is pushed by the elite, as you would say, or members of the elite. You know, it's and so the people go. So they have to join the church, right? Is there like a membership for the Peyote Way Church of God? Like you have to join to be able to take peyote. You know, is there a hierarchy in the church? Like, is
Oh,
the
they
hierarchy
have,
very similar to Mormonism or very similar to Freemasonry? Like, how's
yes.
it structured?
Well, what happens is, you send away for a membership, you get some information. If you want to go visit and have a spirit walk, like I said, you have to pre sign up. You got to get on a waiting list, and then you go and pay. You sign a bunch of forms. Some of them go to the feds. Some of them go to the state of Arizona. And then, they give you a little chat and find out what you're about. And then, you fast for 24 hours, which is essential for ingesting peyote. You have to really clear your system and your mind out because it's a very powerful experience and can last a couple of days. It comes on very slowly and it peaks forever, and then it takes forever to come down back into reality, your re-entry. So you're even, a Native American church ceremony, you're looking at a couple of days, It's, you can do it overnight, but
And you're out in the hot desert. You're sweating. You're purging, as they say.
Yeah, you have to fast a water fast for a minimum of 24 hours, and that's pretty standard with anybody using the sacrament.
How is the trip on peyote compared to other trips like LSD or ayahuasca? People giving different accounts of using psychedelics in the trip. How is the trip on peyote?
Peyote is very gentle. It's very, very psychedelic. Most of my peyote experiences are just as powerful as LSD as far as visual and audio. I will only speak for myself, but I would have visual and auditory hallucinations, and it's very introspective. It just turns on this introspection where you're looking at your life and all the shit you've done and all the shit you're doing, and you feel bad about it, and you want to change your life, and you're grateful the next day to have had that revelation, and it gives you a new impetus to live your life better. I think peyote has made me a better father, a better citizen. I don't have a beef with the plant itself. I have a beef with people that have a phony background and start a religion over it. With this whole, you can't start something on lies and deceit and then say, well, this is a good thing. I just don't see how that works. It's like in court, if they find out one thing is a lie, then the whole thing is tossed out.
Yes. Yeah.
The whole testimony is tossed out. So, I have no beef with peyote. It should be conserved, and if people want to take it, I strongly suggest not going down to Texas and Mexico and digging it up. You need to grow your own supply, just like cannabis. Grow your own supply, become active in its conservation. It's not a protected species right now, and it's being depleted by onion fields and hunters and condominiums, and a lot of it was depleted by the 70s anyway, by hippies and beatniks. It was a lot of the natural supply in Texas was just gone. There's only 2 counties, maybe 3 counties in Texas where it can still be found. And that's rapidly diminishing too.
So to take the peyote with the peyote, to take the peyote, the Peyote Way Church of God, some of the forms you actually had to fill out were going to the United States FBI. That was actually part of?
I don't know if it was going to the FBI, but okay. It was the feds. Whoever the feds are, the federal authorities want to know that you're ingesting psychedelics and how much you're taking. Like it has like you're going to eat.
So I'd assume it's probably going to the alcohol ATF, right? Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. I would assume.
I don't know for sure, but it also goes to the state of Arizona.
Interesting. Okay, so they have a database of whoever consumes it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that you have to fill out the forms and get a little talk. They want to feel you out.
Yeah, it's interesting that they have to. It kind of reminds me of here in North Carolina, growing of marijuana is decriminalized to some degree, but it still can get you arrested, if you get caught with growing, marijuana in North Carolina. However, you have to pay your if you grow marijuana and you make money on the growth of marijuana and the sale of the marijuana that you grew, you still have to pay taxes by the form of tax stamps in the county that I live in, which is Cumberland County in North Carolina. And so you have to literally go to the courthouse where the cops are, go up to the cashier's office, ask for the form, fill it out, pay it, and then leave. But they can't. Okay, when you fill out the form and you pay your taxes on the pot you grew, which is illegal, by the way, they cannot turn you in. It has to be protected, because if the cashier turns you into the cops, who are in that building, by the way, they can go to jail for 10 years. That's how. Does that make any sense, Carl? Does that make any sense?
Colorado has a similar thing where it's tracked from seed to harvest, completely tracked from seed to harvest.
But it's legal in Colorado, though, right? Where in North Carolina, it's not. It's not legal. It's illegal to grow it, but you still have to pay taxes on it.
When I was growing cannabis in the backyard, I didn't have to register it with anybody. So yeah, it's a pretty weird scene, man.
So it's interesting for you to take peyote at the Peyote Way Church of God. You have to fill out some forms to go to the feds, let the feds know that you're consuming peyote. It's just interesting to me. It's like peyote is illegal. Consuming peyote is illegal outside, of you being. I would assume there's certain Native American tribes who are protected who are able to consume peyote. And then the Peyote Way Church of God, so.
What Emmanuel did was he cleared the way for all race peyote use. It's legal to take in 4 states that I know of. Arizona, Colorado, Oregon, and Utah, I believe, possibly Nevada. That was a result of his court case in 1967. He won his case. He was busted with peyote, LSD, and hashish in 1966 in Denver, and it went through the courts. And in 67, they said, oh, it's cool. You're using this in a religious manner. So he's credited with starting all race peyote use, which, like I said, now it's at least 4 states you can use it.
Interesting. He did it in Utah, where the Mormons are Mormon church is headquartered now.
Well, there's competition there, too. They got this guy named James Flaming Eagle Mooney, who claims to be part Indian. And him and his wife started a peyote church, and they're just jamming away. And they're basically big competition. They're probably the only competition to Peyote Way. And as far as the Masonic thing goes, they have different degrees for clergy. I was a 1st degree clergy, and it goes up to 4th degree as far as I know, which is what Emmanuel was, as far as I know.
And that's very similar to Masonry and very similar to Mormonism. The degrees. Of course, with Masonry, you have 3rd degree in Blue Lodge, and Scottish New York Rite Masonry. You have 32, 33 degrees. 33 degree to being honorary. So it's quite interesting, that Mormonism mirrors itself to that, and the Peyote Way Church of God, who has connections to Mormonism, also mirrors its way to Freemasonry too as well. So that's an interesting connection between all of that. So what about the use of media, through music and television and movies to promote the use of illicit drugs throughout the many decades? It's quite interesting how Hollywood, the music industry, they all have pushed illicit drug use, which the United States government claims that it's against, but you and I both know that the war on drugs is a crock of crap, and it's a way for the United States government and the military-industrial complex and the intelligence complexes to make money on us, the people. But what's your opinion on that, Carl? What do you think about, them using the Fourth Estate, for the lack of the better words, and media as a whole to push illicit drug use on the population?
Oh, it's been everywhere. As far as peyote goes, I've seen episodes on Family Guy where they talk about peyote. There's a little skit. There was a show with Michael J. Fox where they talked about him eating peyote. That peyote itself has been creeping into the culture more and more. But as we know, you start thinking of people like Barry Seal bringing in tons of cocaine, under Bill Clinton's complete okay. It's like, yeah, bring it on in. So the government has always been involved.
I mean, the heroin trafficking by the government, into Harlem during the 40s and 50s, the trafficking of crack cocaine and the Iran-Contra affair in the 80s. I mean, even you can go back to Reefer Madness, which, it's so ludicrous in its presentation of smoking marijuana that it almost glorifies it in a way it would make people want to smoke it because how over the top the movie is.
Oh, yeah. When I was a kid in Catholic school, they used to have a cop come in once in a while with a chart and different samples of drugs. Like the pills were empty, the capsules were empty, but we couldn't wait to get our hands on it. There was a whole group of us that could not wait to get our hands on these drugs. And I think that is kind of how it works with everybody. It's just like alcohol. When you're young, you want to reach in there and get a drink, or have a cigarette. And I've never had a cigarette in my life. Tobacco is probably the only drug I've never tried. Never got interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it. I've smoked marijuana. I never really liked alcohol very much because my father died from hepatitis C. I avoided hard drugs because my father was a heroin addict. I've taken ayahuasca once in my life. I've done salvia a few times. I don't know. I just wasn't a big user of drugs. And I haven't used any. My wife and I both gave up use of anything, even alcohol or cigarettes, since my first son was born back in 2009, my eldest son.
I've never had ayahuasca and I've never had salvia, but I was a booze pig for about 20 years and wrecked a lot of my early life with that and my health. And I was never arrested sober. And in the 80s, I had a 4-year love affair with cocaine, and once I had a seizure, that was the end of that.
Yeah, and the thing is, something that we've discussed too is I believe that psychedelic drugs or even illicit drug use as a whole, I think it it goes against the teachings of Christianity at large. You and I both believing in, Jesus Christ. It seems to me that it seems to be strongly pushed by the government as a source of making money, you could say, but also as a way of destabilization of the family. Most people that use illicit drugs, some people do. Some people do get off of them. All glory to God for that. But some people tragically don't. So they either die, or they harm their loved ones around them. My grandma went to Narconon for years, and you see people, especially since you've come out of the fog, and my uncle came out of the fog too. Like my uncle used a massive amount of psychedelics in his youth, and he later became a lawyer, and he's tragically passed away back in May. But he used to talk about his experiences, and my uncle's a very strong Christian, and he was like, thank God I don't use any of that stuff anymore because he saw what it did to my father, and it seems to me that, and I want to get your opinion on this, the pushing of it, you could say it is from a carnal mindset of the governments to make all this money, right, and to keep society under control somewhat. Because most people will say on the New Age movement, you use all these drugs and it'll open you up and you have a Kundalini experience and you'll be above everything, right? But most people who end up using these drugs, that ends up not happening, right? They end up,
it's a fantasy.
So expound on that a little bit, if you don't mind, Carl.
Well, I was taking LSD an awful lot. We were teenagers, my friends and I, 14 years old, and we were taking large amounts of LSD frequently. And I took an awful lot of it. I'm not even going to try and guess how much because people wouldn't believe it anyway, but we were massive acid heads. I really loved it, loved LSD. And what it does is, drugs in particular, but especially the hallucinogens, you start getting this delusion that your fantasies are real, and you're above it all, and you have this touchstone to God and this spirituality, when in reality what happens, it takes you away from your culture, your family, the deeper you get into it, and your religion, and you start getting these, what you could say is Marxist ideas where anything goes. I want to have sex with anybody, whenever, no problem. I want to do what I want to do. It's like an ultimate selfishness, and everything's justified.
Yeah.
There is no evil. This is what I want to do. This is me expressing myself and being free, and it's all a complete fantasy. You always hear, well, look, Steve Jobs took acid, and so did Carl Sagan. Yeah, but they weren't complete acid heads, and they weren't taking multiple doses, twice a week and for years. So these examples of people that have achieved are very, very few and far between. Most people, the overwhelming majority, really don't amount to much in their life, and they're just menial workers, just slaves to the grindstone paying the bills. And it's a fantasy. It's a complete, absolute fantasy.
Yeah, that's what I've seen in my own personal life. I mean, my father, he didn't do psychedelics so much. He did more like of heroin, even though he went for years giving it up, and he gave up alcohol, but he got hooked up on Oxycontin thanks to the Sackler family. And I can't stand them because of it, but I'm trying to be a better person and forgive them, but they wrecked my family, but fine, whatever. But it's when I see most people, and there's different people take different drugs for different reasons. A lot of times this escape, people have issues that they don't want to face, or they don't want to come, they don't want to truly see who they are. So they kind of use it. One of the main reasons drug use occurs is an escape mechanism for life. It's a very Gnostic mindset, where, like you mentioned earlier, you almost want to see the world as like a matrix, like it doesn't exist. Like, you kind of want to give into the delusions. You want to live in a fantasy land. That's the fantasy land is real. What's going on here and now, what I'm experiencing right now, well, that's not real, so it ends up feeding into that. And so most people who end up taking hard drugs or psychedelics, it ends up changing not only the neurochemistry of their brain, but even on a spiritual level, it ends up damaging their soul over a long period of time to some degree. And, not everyone has those experiences, but it happens to a good majority of people who use illicit drugs for a very long period of time. And there's a lot of stigmatism against people who use drugs for a long period of time too, as well, who are drug users. Some people think, well, you should just lock them all in prison, and some people think, well, you should use Jungian analytical psychology to fix all their ills. You got to take it on a case by case basis. Some people need rehabilitation. In my opinion, most people just need God and need to stop being angry at God. And it's tough. It really is. I mean, I never was a hard drug user myself, but I've suffered because I've known people and who I've loved very much and lost them because they were. So it ends up Hollywood and the industry glorifies drug use. It makes it seem like it's glamorous in most cases. And you'll see. It's a
self-fulfilling prophecy, too. It's like water seeks its own level.
Yeah.
So you pick any drug, and you're surrounded by people that use that drug, and everybody thinks, they're hip, slick, and cool. The heroin people, the drunks, the beer pigs, the psychedelic people, they all tend to band together, And then they got this, what do you call it, like an echo chamber. They all reinforce each other's delusions.
Yeah, and the government ends up, profiting off of it. And it destabilizes society, and a lot of people fall away from God because of it. And so you have the spiritual aspect, from a Christianity standpoint, that people rebel against God. And like you mentioned earlier, many people who use psychedelic drug use, because the Kundalini spirit is involved with that, the spirit of divination, they go, I'm God. I don't need God. I'm God. I can do whatever I want. And that's the basis of the Mystery Babylon religion, is do what thou wilt. You can do whatever you want. You're God. It doesn't matter. There are no consequences. And that's what ends up happening.
Almost everybody that gets heavy into LSD gets the God complex and the Messiah complex. And I have met people that thought they could levitate, read minds, see auras. You know, there's a lot of bad stories that I've seen in psychedelics. And, you know, I wasted the best years of my life with all that bullshit. And, you know, where are all these people now in my time of need, you know? I'm living on Social Security. My health is a wreck. It's like, well, you know, I made my choices. And as a young age, I went for the Paisley pipe dream, as I call it. You know, I was 10 years old in 1967, and I saw Ed Sullivan and Hollywood Palace and Lloyd Thaxton's dance party and Hullabaloo. And I thought all these dudes in the British invasion and all these musicians, it's like, yeah, man, that's what I want. These guys are cool. And what's funny is there's a man, he's long dead now, but he was a neighbor. And back then in the 60s, he said, this shit is all communism. This is all to wreck America, and we're going to be taken over by communism. These sons of bitches are pushing drugs on the kids. And everybody thought he was full of shit. Everybody thought he was full of shit. He'd see somebody with a peace sign on their shirt. He'd come running out of the house. Don't you know that's an upside down crow's foot? That's a symbol of witchcraft. It's like, oh, fuck, I got to get away. He's going to do the lecture. And that man was right. And if I ever see him in the spirit world, in heaven or wherever, I'm going to say, you know what? You were right, and I wished I listened to you. And, you know, he lost several of his 8 children to drugs and alcohol. They you know, ran around and lost a lot of their life and unproductive shit. Some of them had psychiatric problems. The guy was right. It is communism. And look where we are today, you know, after the 60s explosion. You know, this whole thing was planned by very smart, diabolical people a long time ago. You know, Tavistock and the Frankfurt School. These were genius devils, man. And we're seeing, you know, the last, say, let's 40 years, we're seeing the fruits of those programs.
The poison fruit, and it still continues, right? So if you have someone like you who lived it, and you're like, hey, you probably don't want to go down the same path I did, you get ostracized. And if I say, hey, I had family members who went down a similar path, you know, as a Christian, you probably, you know, as saying as a Christian, you know, God probably doesn't want you to go down that path, you know. Again, you know, it's all witchcraft, you know, it's all, you know, from a spiritual level, it's all Satan trying to deceive and, you know, give people into their own, you know, sin and flesh, which, you know, God allows people who continue to go down that path. He allows them to continue to go down that path because, you know,
free will, and natural law is a result, man.
Maybe, you know, they'll turn to him in their darkest hour, you know, who knows? It happened to my father. So, you know, it comes to that point where anybody, the true counterculture was that man yelling at the Astroturfed Counterculture hippies, you know, that were uncontrolled. Hey, you don't want to do that. So it's just, you see that today because people like you and I would be ostracized just by having, you know, just by having the discussion that we've had and said, hey, maybe you don't want to think of only yourself. Maybe you want to clean your act up, you know, and have a family, turn to God, you know, get a job, take care of your health. You know, maybe these are things that you want to do instead of giving into any, because look, I'm a millennial. There isn't much difference between the mindset of a millennial and the mindset of a baby boomer during the counterculture movement. Our technology might have been increased, but the amount that's given to the flesh is very identical with the amount that people are just self-absorbed with each other. And these drugs perpetuate that.
Drugs keep you from becoming the best you can be. They really keep you from becoming the best person you can be. All of these drugs, alcohol, I don't give a shit what it is. You know, that's my opinion. People might not agree with it.
No, I agree with you.
100%. My life and people I've known, all these drugs keep you from being the best you can be. You're chasing this Paisley pipe dream constantly. And I've lost friends over my, you know, how I see things now in the counterculture and the Grateful Dead and all this shit and Frank Zappa. I've lost some friends and some of them think I'm an idiot. And, you know, it's like, hey, whatever, man. We all have free will, and everything we do is a result of a train of thought and actions. You know, we think things, we do things, and we get results. And the difference between a good idea and a bad idea is the result you get. You know, I mean. prove me wrong.
So no, and those people are proven wrong, and sadly will be proven wrong, and you're in the right. And it's. I mean, look at the Grateful Dead. What can you discuss about them and them pushing, illicit drug use and them working with United States intelligence agencies? If we're going to talk about Astroturfed Counterculture, the Grateful Dead is definitely one big example of that. What can you discuss about the Grateful Dead real quick with your research, Carl, and what you come across there?
He was a foaming at the mouth Deadhead and a foaming at the mouth Zappa head, but I toured in 1982 and saw about 30 concerts. The Grateful Dead are we all know that the intelligence connections, the Scientology connections, we all know about all that. And now we've got the Kabbalah magic in there with Phil Lesh wearing a Kabbalah bracelet. Mm-hmm. And this same tribe keeps popping up everywhere in the drug culture and the music and entertainment industry. It's the same tribe that's running it and telling us this stuff is good and cool. I got pretty heavy into that LSD scene, and I did some couple of large deals when I was running around there doing the tours. And everybody should know by now that it's a federal operation. You could see Jerry Garcia's FBI file. He was, I don't know where to start with them. I can't listen to their music anymore. Like I said on Crypto Beast, putting on some live Grateful Dead music, I'm instantly tripping again. It's like a flashback, the neuroplasticity. I can really feel like I'm tripping my ass off listening to Grateful Dead music, and to a large extent, the Allman Brothers and Frank Zappa, too. So I can't listen to the kind of music I used to listen to when I was tripping, because I'm right back there again. Now, there's times in the last couple of years I'd smoke a couple joints and I'll listen to some Grateful Dead, and I'm right back. I'm gone, man. That's it. And it's just so insidious. A lot of people end up living their life in a van selling LSD until they get busted. Then most of them turn federal informants, and that's a whole nother story. And I love my friends, and some of them are still chasing the dead around and going to all the shows. And it's like, I don't have, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have the money to dick around like that, and my health wouldn't allow it. But it's like, man, I wish you would read some of the stuff I've sent you and the links and look at some of the stuff, the YouTube things, the different things. They don't want to hear it. It's like, no, I like the music. Well, you're supposed to like the music. That's why it was written like that. And if you know about music, when they change the tonality, the toning, the scale, the whole bit, you read what Huxley said about it. It's like, it's just so plain to see, and to keep doing that after once you've gone through the door and come back again, it's like, there's no way, man. I already wasted enough time with that bullshit.
And so each generation, they keep running the same playbook, the infiltration through media, through music, and I guess eventually you would want to hope it would stop, right? But it seems with each subsequent generation, it gets worse and worse and worse, and technologies help, driving that even further, and like I have a lot of my uncle's records here, and a lot of them, he still listened to a lot of the same music that he listened to from that time period. I have Beatles records here. I have Allman Brothers records here. I have Grateful Dead records here. And something that we've always discussed is Tucker Carlson is a huge Deadhead. I briefly mentioned it in my expose series of Tucker, but like he's gone to numerous Grateful Dead concerts.
His name's Ship of Fools, which is a Grateful Dead song.
So, it's interesting, Tucker being a likely CIA agent, him touring with the Dead quite often. I'm just saying it's quite interesting.
And he wears a Kabbalah bracelet, too.
Yes, he does. So, again, I mean, if you look hard enough, Carl, that's the thing is that if people really look hard enough and they have the discernment of the Holy Spirit, you can start looking through and seeing, the numerous connections that all of these groups and all of these people have to one another, and the nefarious ways that they're working to subvert culture as a whole. I mean, to pretty much to do their best to attempt to stick a finger in God's eye, but it just doesn't work out that way. But that's what it ends up trying to be. I mean, like
you become your own higher power, and the music becomes your higher power.
Yeah, and the drugs become your gateway to a higher power because you yourself become the higher power, and it's a cycle. And you just see the same people over and over and over again and the same names. And you're right. I mean, you and I could sit here and talk about this for hours, but sometimes it's something you mentioned. Sometimes I think about just throwing in the towel and just giving up because it's like I'm screaming into the wall, right? It's like if you can't get your own friends to listen to you, how the heck are you going to get a stranger who lives 300 miles away from listening to you, And
Yeah.
And I understand that that's how it be, as Jesse Spots say, in our own digital ghettos or whatever. The internet's caused a lot of that to happen where sometimes we haven't got to check ourselves, right, because we're arguing in our own echo chambers. But, I mean, what about, have you seen the pushing of illicit drug use in the New Age in the MAGA movement with Trump? And it's seeming like they're trying to completely co-opt conservatism, which conservatism was always a shell anyway, with the Council for National Policy and the John Birch Society, to seem like they are fighting against these things, but they really aren't. But here recently, it seems like it's come to a head where they're really trying to push psychedelic use to like Jordan Sather and David Wilcox,
Alex Jones and Joe Rogan.
Yeah, and trying to push it. I mean, have you seen any of that? Have you, watching videos of people and anything like that, have you seen there seems to be a very strong push and resurgence? I mean, Trump used to come out with his theme song with Age of Aquarius. So
yeah, and the Rolling Stones thing, too. Can't get whatever it is.
Can't get no set.
Can't always get what you want.
Yeah, can't always get what you want. Yes, true.
And they're some of the biggest Satanists on the planet.
So do you think there's a lot of a repush for all this going on right now? Again, through even you're trying to like a subversion of Christians and a subversion of conservatives in America, trying to push them into the New Age.
I can't say that as far as the MAGA movement and the conservatives go. I've not really noticed that. I just see buttheads like Rogan and et cetera, talking about DMT.
Yeah, and glorifying it.
Yeah, and MDA. I was taking MDA. It was still legal. I was taking it in 1980 and 81, and it was still legal then. I haven't had any since 1981. But DMT, I took it once, and it was made in a lab by some bikers, and that was in 1978. So I haven't had any DMT either since 78. Might have been 79. But no, I haven't noticed a push like that outside of the, if you want to call Rogan a conservative, I don't know.
No, he's not. It's just start paying attention and start looking, because they're really trying to incorporate the New Age. And I'll send you some stuff into the MAGA movement. They really are. Like it's insane when you really look at it. Which, I mean, makes sense. I mean, all the same players, whether it's Kabbalists. I mean, Roseanne was very big in pushing pushing Trump. Mormons and Freemasons. I mean, all the same groups are still, pushing.
They want to grab as many people as possible. I have no doubt what you're saying. They want to grab as many people as possible and destabilize them.
No, very much so. And it's sad, because it seems the direction of the way that everything is going. Is for them to continue to I mean, it's going to get worse before, if it ever gets better before Jesus comes back. Do you think that the Peyote Way Church of God is going to exist after Emmanuel Trejo's death?
Oh,
do you think it's still going to continue?
He's been gone for a number of years now. And they're stronger than ever. I think in 2015. I'd have to check. Who's in control of it now? Rabbi Matthew Kent and his wife, Reverend Ann Zath.
Oh, so ecumenicanism. They're a rabbi and a reverend together. Okay, that's extremely interesting. So
and neither of them are ordained. Neither of them have that religious training. Emmanuel dubbed them rabbi and reverend. That came from him. I think I sent you the Village Voice article where they say that. neither one of them were trained in that. And Matthew was actually brought up as an Episcopalian. His mother was Christian. And
wow.
He's been known as Rabbi Kent since 77.
So we're having a kind of a universalist marriage of all religions there together, right? So you have Native American mysticism, Judaism, for lack of a better term, and Christianity, for the lack of a better term, all together into one. So
it's a mishmash of everything. Everything is incorporated in there.
Which is very common to most New Age religions.
Yes. A lot of these psychedelic groups too, they claim all race, all religion, in our dogma. It's a hell of a mind screw.
So there's no distinctions. I understand, I as far as our all race, it's just we're all one. I mean, it's the same stuff that you get from Barbara Marx Hubbard. There are differences. Not that a person should be prejudiced towards another person or anything like that. But there are differences between there's even individual differences between like me and you, for example. So it's just interesting of how they're always trying to make everything into one.
This push on the Jewish angle too is so obvious.
Yeah, you're right.
Phil Lesh holds cedar ceremonies. He does a cedar. I sent you those clips, I think, along with some articles. He's been doing cedar ceremonies and reading Exodus and all this other stuff. It's like, what the hell, man? Just, wow, what the hell? That's a whole nother bag of worms that you could get into. It's so vast and so rooted in society now and so accepted. And like I told you, in the reggae movement and the Grateful Dead movement, there is absolutely no criticism of the war crimes of Israel or the plight of the Palestinian people. It's there's no criticism,
No, and there won't be. I mean, I feel even the Voice of the Martyrs recognizes that the Christian Palestinians are persecuted by the Muslim Palestinians, but not persecuted not as much by the Muslim Palestinians as they're persecuted by the Jews who live in Israel. And the Voice of the Martyrs gets a lot of crap for holding that position. But, it is what it is. So
Zig Marley does concerts in Israel. And I have friends that are huge in the reggae movement. They don't even know about Palestine. They're all dancing One Love and doing the hand signs and Jah this and Jah that. It's like, if you're so concerned about human rights as an American Indian, you really need to know what the hell's going on with Palestine, because there's not a peep. And the same thing in the psychedelic Grateful Dead movement. Not a peep. But they're all concerned about human rights.
And there's not a peep at the Peyote Way Church of God, I would assume, either. So interesting. I mean, you're right. I've never seen anybody within the counterculture movement ever mention what's happening in Palestine. Of course, it seems to be labeled that anybody who mentions any of the atrocities that happen in Palestine as being anti-Semitic, and the Anti-Defamation League comes after you. So
look at Pink Floyd's Roger Waters. He's the loudest voice in music, about Palestine, and he won't play there, and he's constantly talking about Palestine and the plight and the whole bit. It's like, I got to give my hats off to Roger Waters. He's pretty hip to what's going on there, and they've tried to stifle his career a few times, and he gets boycotted and called an anti-Semite. And it's like, hey, can we have a logical adult conversation about actual facts that can be verified instead of screaming you're an anti-Semite? It's just so ridiculous.
No, I know, but you can't anymore. And it's the way the world is. It's as a Christian, it's the New Testament is anti-Semitic. The New Testament is anti-Semitic.
Gospel of John.
Yeah, trying to convert someone who's Jewish to Christianity is anti-Semitic. It just blows my mind every day. But okay, is there anything else you want to say in closing, Carl, or anything you could think of, sir?
No, I think we did a good blast there. I'm sure a lot of this is new to your audience, this kind of a topic. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like I said, people can go do their own research and find all kind of FBI files where Emmanuel's named directly, and that hundreds and hundreds of pages where he's named by name. And there's other hundreds of pages where his name is blanked out, but you know they're talking about him by the subject matter. So, and if you research him, you got to do all of his names, and you'll get a full picture.
And I'll put together with all the links that Carl gave me a paste bin. That I'm gonna upload this to my main channel. I can't stream on my main channel right now because I have another strike. I have 2 strikes currently on my main channel, so no streaming for me on my main channel. I've been a very naughty boy.
Speech in this country.
Nah, yeah, that never exists. You and I have talked about that. So I'll be putting this up on my main channel for you guys to listen. I would definitely thank Carl for coming on. I'll have him on again. You'll see him in the chat. I want to
do anything.
I want to, you know, major respect for all the research that you have done, Carl. I mean, it's massive.
You know, I gave you a fraction. I have a massive amount of information I've amassed, and I was hoping to do a part 3 with Steve, and it never transpired. But I've got grammar like out the wazoo. I encourage people to do a little bit of their own research too, and really find out what's going on.
Yeah, you have so many FBI documents and everything, and Freedom of Information Act request documents, and it's, look, if you take anything from our discussion here, try to take your own personal responsibility and reconnect with God the Father and Jesus Christ if you haven't, because it's going to continue to get worse. Things are not going to get better. And we got a lot of things coming around the corner that many people are aware of on this channel. That seems like things are getting worse. And try your best not to fall for all the subversion out there. You know, there's a lot of potholes and a lot of traps for people.
I would like to say, in addition to thank you for having me on and giving me some time, I would like to say that being in and out of the counterculture and being far left and mid left and coming through the other side of all that shit, it actually scared me back to Jesus Christ. You know, I started out as a Catholic and then was a pagan and everything, an atheist, existentialist. And seeing what I saw and experiencing what I experienced, it literally scared me back to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, he is the way, the truth, and the life, and he will protect his sheep. But all right, everybody, take care. God bless. I'll put this back up. We'll have Carl on again. You'll see him in the chat. And all right, everybody, have a good day. Bye.